Hello, friends. I guess what I want right now is to know whether you'll lend me a little of your attention, whether we can do a bit of a mind meld and a heart meld and think about things together. The things that I want to discuss today. The question of, is there such a thing as a spiritual achievement? And if there is, what would that look like? Have you had any sense of spiritual achievement in your life? Do you look out at the world, at human beings, and have a sense of spiritual achievement? Okay, so some of it sounds grandiose. I, for example, know that what is described as fundamental realization or enlightenment actually happened to me when I was 30 years old. It was a profound spiritual opening, spiritual awakening, but it wasn't in the least an achievement. It wasn't an achievement because I didn't do it. It happened to me. So when people talk about their out of body experiences or their near death experiences or the fundamental opening that might have happened to them one day in the forest, or when somehow they lost control and threw themselves off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived, and their lives were utterly changed, and this is well documented. I jokingly call them transformational Golden Gate Bridge seminars. 100% change of life, awakening of one depth or another, 2% survival. Not the best way to do it. Let's hope mankind doesn't do it that way. Let's hope we don't have to wake up by nearly annihilating ourselves. But let's talk about spiritual achievement. If I take any credit in myself for spiritual achievement, it's because I wondered how it might be possible to kindle a similar kind of awakening in other people. Because it really isn't possible, but yet, as one Zen statement goes, enlightenment's an accident. Zen practice makes you accident prone. I tried to make people accident prone. I devised retreats that used so many different modalities of human consciousness that were where we danced, we breathed, we fasted, we did things that caused one discontinuity after another. You know what discontinuity is when you're surfing and suddenly you're just riding the wave without thought, or skiing, or dancing, or making love, or poetry just comes out of you, or you just simply are taken in a moment and you don't feel a division anymore between you and the world that you're looking at, or between you as a separate self with its own mind and some greater kind of mind that briefly you feel at one with. Those kinds of discontinuities. I designed a work that did that all the time, and now I've retired that work because it's people aren't ready for that anymore. Our world has changed so much. They might be ready for it, but I'm also getting to the point where the kind of energy it takes to do that is no longer something I want to do. But this I want to do. I want to ask you, what do you think is a spiritual achievement? Have you ever lived it? What would it mean for you to have achieved something spiritually? Here's what I think it would be. I think it would be that you've noticed that your children are reacting badly to what you're trying to do for them. And you stop and you do as much reading as you can to find out what are people saying about childhood development and about parenting. And then having read those things, you ask yourself, what works the best for me to cause me to relax and open my heart and be receptive? No, I'm not saying parenting's easy. I'm not saying your children are ever going to make it easy for you. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, what if you became a student by listening and watching your children of what you could live and be that helps their hearts open, that helps them become receptive, that receptive to life, not just receptive to you and your rules, but to their world, their life. And boy, you have a tough job because you have to set limits on primarily their attention, because there's screens and their computer things and TikTok and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter. These things are going to claim their attention. And frankly, I'm not sure how much that will feed them. And maybe you don't know either. I do know what does feed people. It's being in their bodies, being active, discovering themselves in their bodies, in a forest, on a playing field, at the ocean, in a canoe, and on and on. You can get the idea. But not as a competitive sport, unless it's that competition they want to have with themselves to become more excellent at something. But not simply their attention captured by screens flipping by. That'll be, and it is one of your challenges. But how would you be able to communicate to your children that there might be something even more fascinating and meaningful to life? How do you set limits, but then offer them something that begins to engage their soul? Now, it's a different stage of life than maybe you're thinking. But yesterday I saw a short video by a 16-year-old who was away for quite a while in a kind of program. And one of the aspects of the program, it didn't let him come home for the holidays, but he had time to learn to play the piano. And so in this video, he was just using simple chords and playing the song, one of the Beatles songs, and sending it to his uncle, who happened to show it to me. It's a kind of spiritual achievement. He didn't have a computer there. They wouldn't give him a screen. They'd give him a banjo and a guitar and a piano and a countryside to walk in. He was in the forests of North Carolina. And the fact that he turned to music and taught himself a song and then wanted to share it with his uncle. And when his dad was coming to visit him, to pick him up now, finally to take him home, because the program is over for the time being. Where does his heart get that idea? I'm going to share this with my uncle. His uncle's been on a spiritual path. His uncle has touched him in some way that became part of the impulse, that became part of what he lived. And that's just a simple example. There could be billions of these examples every single day. That would be a spiritual achievement. Our lives are difficult, challenging. There's so much demanded of us. But is there anything more important than making it possible for our children to know their own bodies more, to feel themselves in life more, to understand something more of heart and awareness and the essential nature of what they give their attention to? That would be, to me, an extraordinary spiritual achievement. What about you're in a marriage and you've had fight after fight after fight, and one day both of you look at each other and say, why are we doing this to each other? What is it that causes us? And then they can find me, and they can find my books, The Mandala Being, Inside Out Healing, any of my books, and they can read them and find out the reason they're fighting is that they're telling themselves stories about themselves and each other based upon their histories, based upon their upbringing, based upon experiences they've had. And these stories are causing them to be resentful and bitter and angry and judgmental of each other, of themselves. And that endlessly leads to the worst of human engagement. And it's so much suffering. What if one of them said, what if we're not here to suffer? What if we were given bodies to celebrate, to know limitless intimacy? And what if they said, I'm going to stop telling myself any kind of story that closes my heart. I'm going to stop believing anything about you, my friend, my love. I'm not going to believe what I tell myself about who you are and what you do and what you don't. And the other one turns around, and this is grace. This would be a miracle. This would be spiritual achievement, spiritual of the highest order. Says, you're right. I want to do the same thing inside myself. I want to stop poisoning myself with beliefs that close my heart to you. And they look at each other, and they look and gaze deeply and say, let's try the experiment of love with each other. If our relationship could bring us to deep intimacy, if it could bring us to limitless intimacy, to love, How would it want me to talk to you about the things that distress me? How would it want me to listen to you when you talk to me about the things that distress me? How would that love of love, that relational holding presence, a third consciousness, how would it want us to share with each other? That would be a spiritual achievement to me. Wouldn't it be to you? And if you have a good relationship, would you like it to be even more intimate? Would you like to take a risk to go a little bit deeper? Would you look at each other and say, there's nothing wrong here, but I wonder if we both put a little more of our time and attention to listening to things like this talk, or reading things from great minds, not just angry minds with opinion about what's going on in the world today. Irritated minds, impatient minds. That's not going to help you. There's just a tiny, tiny taste of what it means, to live spiritual achievement. To end this life knowing that you learned that you were never given a body to suffer and be angry, and life is tough and there is suffering, but to surrender your identity when you can see it, your beliefs that close your heart or make you angry or cause you to polarize in ways that don't lead to generative argument, generative discussion, new ways of thinking between people on different sides of attention, but really polarizing into disconnect. We see it in the world everywhere. We see it in politics. We see it in culture wars. Why would anyone believe anything that poisons you in your heart relative to someone else? That spiritual achievement would be to say, I was given a body in order to know joy, in order to know love. What about Jesus? He said, the commandment isn't to love God, it's to love one another. In other words, he made love God. Don't love God, obey God's rules and see if that fits with the other. Love one another. Find what your relationship to love is and live your relationship to love with everyone else. Your relationship to love, yours, that's a spiritual achievement. Don't believe what someone else tells you about God's rules or God's laws or what the great prophets and the great teachers have said. What's your relationship to what they've said? So there we go. I woke up, but it had nothing to do with me. And what's had everything to do with me is how I've lived since then, the work I created, the relationship I live with my wife, Catherine, and with every other human being to the best of my ability. And there is incredible uncertainty in life. I don't know anything about future security. Do you? Are you going to live your life to have future security? Yes, of course you have the right to do that. To have a nice home, to save money, to do all these basic things. But that's no spiritual achievement, that you can go play golf in your retirement or go on cruises. They can be nice. That's not the point. The spiritual achievement is that you don't run away from yourself when there's fear. You don't close your heart when uncertainty scares you. We human beings are so poorly adapted, incapable of uncertainty, and yet the future is always absolute uncertainty, limitless uncertainty, and infinite possibility. Incrementally, I think human beings are evolving spiritually. I don't know if we'll survive, that we can evolve fast enough to take responsibility for the kinds of darkness I just talked about. We believe our thoughts and we polarize around thinking. We don't listen to our bodies. We think being angry and being righteous means that we're true to ourselves. It just means you're listening to something untrue. Make your own self unhappy about anyone or anything. That is your mind lying to you. Your mind doesn't lie to you when you sit in a kind of stillness and gratitude and wonderment, even when there is fear, even when there is no certainty, even when you're facing death, even when you're dying, even when others around you are suffering that you love. All of that is part of life. Life is difficult, but to stand up and say, I'm going to live my life, and I'll never know if it's a spiritual achievement, but I'm going to decide what that might look like. I'm going to decide what it would be to achieve spiritually. Every relationship counts. What you do with your attention all day long counts. Who you mind meld with what you read and what you watch and what you listen to. It counts. Hope you had fun. I love imagining I'm talking to someone that believes what I'm saying matters and didn't shut this off because it ran however long it turns out to run. Blessings to you all.